So Sylvia, hello.
Hi. Glad I made it here.
Yes, it was a lot of work with Ubers making it here. But we made it here. So we'll start now, and maybe if we have time for questions, we'll do it, but who knows? It's going to be kind of short. We'll see how we do.
Yeah.
So first off, Sylvia, how long have you been dancing? Lindy Hop.
It's hard to say because I did really bad Lindy Hop that I don't think anybody else would have recognized as Lindy Hop, but I thought I was doing Lindy Hop. This would be 1965.
Okay, so longer than me.
50 years.
Okay.
Way longer than you
Okay, that's a long time.
have been on the planet.
That's right. That is correct. Okay, so you've been doing it a pretty long time. Can you tell us just a little bit about how you started and how you started maybe in this scene that we are sort of today?
I didn't start in the scene. The scene
Right.
didn't exist.
So give us two startings, if you would.
Yeah. So I was just watching old movies, and I'd always like jazz and the danceable jazz music. And so I'd be watching old movies on television. This was way before VCRs and things like that. And you'd see a dance scene in a movie and think, oh, that's awesome, I want to see that. You know, I want to be able to do that, like Day at the Races or Hills a Poppin' or something like that. So I would watch the movie and then, 8 months later get to watch it again on TV at 3 in the morning and then do the best I could to approximate that, which wasn't very close, but it was the best I could do. But it was, thank God, there's no record of that visually left. Because I'm sure it was awful. Because if you watched Chelsea Poppin' once and then tried to do it, and then you saw it again 9 months later, you'd go, oh, I see, no, yeah. Yeah.
Not as close as you maybe
thought. It was
thought.
really sad. So I was just dancing by watching old movies, and my original dance partner, Jonathan Bixby, and I would go, my mom would drive us into LA. We lived about 2 hours north of Los Angeles. And she would drive us down to Los Angeles to the Hollywood Palladium if there was any big band jazz.
And how old were you guys at this point?
15.
Okay.
14,
Okay.
15. And she would drive us down there, and we would just watch people dance. There was lots of people doing whatever style of Lindy, a lot of different styles of Lindy and Balboa and Bal Swing, and we would just watch them. And then I did embarrassing things, like I would follow a follower into the bathroom. I'd follow some lady into the bathroom and go, hey, I was just watching you, and the guy did an underarm, and you did this thing with your feet, and if I gave you $20, will you show me how to do that? And she's like, what? I was just, what? Go away, I'm in the bathroom. So I didn't really learn much there, but because it was good to watch live people do this dance, not just two-dimensional people on a small screen, because TVs back in those days weren't grand things; they were small. Yeah. Cathode ray CRTs, So anyway,
I do remember. Yeah.
So then it was a long time until I actually found, somebody who was willing to teach me. That was the early '80s. So I had a lot of really horrendously bad habits that I had developed over the years before anybody could tell me anything. So.
Okay, so how did you, first of all, who did you sort of run into that sort of helped you learn this thing for real, and how did you come across them?
So the first person I ran into would be Dean Collins, and I was at a dance contest, and there was this other couple who weren't really great dancers, but you could see that they knew they were way better than we were, that was for sure. And so after the dance contest, I went up and said, hey, that's really great, where'd you learn this stuff, where you hang out, blah, 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 blah. And the lady, whose name is Shirley Feetsum, she's dead now, but she was a really nice lady. She gave me this number of this old guy who was teaching in his basement. He used to kind of be in the movies a long time ago, Dean Collins, but I didn't know that was the Dean Collins of the guy that I'd been watching at Buck Privates and blah, blah, blah for all those years. And so we called him up, and he said, sure, come on over. Drove down there, and this is another 2-hour drive. And we're just kind of sitting there. He goes, well, what do you want to learn how to do? And I said, well, dance. And he had all these pictures on the wall, 8x10 glossies, and there was a picture of Buck Privates. I said, like these guys. He said, well, that's good because that's me. And I was like, I almost wet my pants. I was really excited. So we took a private lesson with him every week until he died. And he died this was in 1980, I think, and he died in 84. So it wasn't that long, but it was a lot because it was like every freaking week.
And
he also
seen a little bit of that, you guys were super intense.
We were super
very
intense.
Into it.
Very into it. You've seen that.
Yes,
and,
the hunger.
He also encouraged us to go to Bobby McGee's, which was like there's two places to kind of go see Southern California dancers in those days. Was Bobby McGee's Long Beach or Bobby McGee's Brea. That kind of was one Sunday it was one place, the next Sunday they kind of hopped back and forth.
Have anybody seen the kind of clips from social dancing for Bobby McGee's?
Yeah.
If you've looked at some Balboa clips,
It's mostly
some of the old
Bal,
masters.
but most of it, there was a lot of Lindy there too. Just that's not what was saved. So.
But you can see a little bit of footage,
Yeah.
actually, of these
Yeah.
great dancers back in the day.
It was styled differently, but yeah.
And just briefly, how many people have heard of Dean Collins before? Just wondering. Okay,
good.
cool. So we don't need a huge primer.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you haven't, you can Google. But
Yeah.
okay, so we got it.
Dean and Jewel. Yeah. And so we would go to Bobby McGee's on a Sunday, which was in the afternoon, and then in the evening after Bobby McGee's, there was another dance about a half hour away from there called the Lion Dior, which was in like a really kind of sleazy strip mall, and it was behind a tuck and roll door that was ripped. So the first time I was there, I was like, but that's where the same kind of people hung out. There was whatever style of Lindy, swing, California swing, Balboa, Bal swing stuff. Everybody, there wasn't the segmentation of the styles hadn't happened because they were all just hanging out together because it was the only people, there might have been, 100 of them and they just hung out together. They didn't have a problem with different styles and stuff.
And how old are these folks at this point? Are these folks from back in the day?
They're back in the 30s, 40s,
Okay.
yeah. They were a little bit younger than I am now. But anyway, yeah, they were probably in their 50s and some were in their 40s, but 50s and 60s for the most part. And then there were some older ones. But it was really fun to get to dance with them, and we were the only kids who were interested at that point or were showing up. So we were the only people under the age of, 50 there. So they had to be nice to us whether they liked it or not. I think that's, and I know that only in that all the old guys were really, really nice, and they would dance one dance with me a night, and then they're like, okay, she's yours now. And because I wasn't very good, and they knew I was interested, and I knew that was the way that I was going to have to learn, but it was slow going, and I really appreciate that every one of those guys sucked it up and danced with me once a night, Yeah. And then finally I got good enough to where they would say, hey, you want to do another one? I thought, oh, I'm a princess. And so then they got to like me, and then I got to be good, and blah, 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 blah. And in 1985, I think it was, I met Frankie Manning and Norma.
Where did you meet them?
At the Cat Club in New York City.
Oh, and this was the fabled weekend where kind of everybody was a little bit.
That was the weekend.
Can you give us just a tiny bit of background on that?
Lindy Hoppers and Aaron and Stephen were there. Yeah. In Frankie's book, there's a little picture of this. It's kind of sad, but there's a little picture of this.
How did everyone come together on that weekend?
I really don't know exactly. I know that a friend of mine named Jan Olson, that doesn't matter, but she had heard through, I think she was a friend of Stephen and Aaron's, and she heard that they were going to go back to New York because there was some kind of to-do happening. Yeah. And so we said, well, we'll go too. So we went too, and it was just this weird meeting of the Jive and Lindy Hoppers and Aaron and Stephen and
Jive and Lindy Hoppers, you guys might know Ryan Francois. He was in that group back then.
And he couldn't swing out.
No.
He had a big afro, and he couldn't swing out at all.
That's right.
I was like, I feel better knowing that Ryan wasn't born that way.
Yes,
that he had to
learn.
work at it. Yeah, it makes me a little happier. Anyway, so then I met most of the East Coast guys at that point, and so then I started taking lessons from all those folks back east.
Okay.
And so that was a slightly different, it was another style. There was a lot of different styles back east. There was more variety on the East Coast, I think, than the West Coast at that time as far as people doing Lindy-ish dances. I was just hungry for anything. If somebody did a cool, weird regional variation, I was all over that. Before YouTube and before a lot of VHS and stuff like that, each community had the way they danced, and it was distinctive. And you could tell in I think it's 85 or 86, there was 2 conventions in California, one in San Diego, one in San Francisco, with a group called the Bay Swingers. And they had all different styles of dancing, but you could tell who was from where just
like
by watching
a dialect or something.
Completely different styling and completely different feel. And it was the same way all over the United States. I met folks from like Texas and Dallas and Houston were different from each other. Oklahoma City was different than Tulsa, St. Louis. So they had all these different regional variations that were really cool, and I was very interested in learning them the best I could, because I just thought they were really interesting ways of doing things. It wasn't like a brand new dance, but it was a completely different style. Same thing with Carolina Shite, which is a slow version of swing stuff. And so I spent most of my time after Dean died, and I could only get with Frankie maybe 4 or 5 times a year. That's kind of what I was chasing down, was those regional variations.
Yeah.
Just because I thought it was interesting. They're kind of washed out now because we all kind of learn from the same YouTube clips, so it's a little bit different now.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get to like the meta discussions about this, what about, like, when did you first get introduced to Balboa? Was it very early on with Dean, and when did you meet Maxie?
Yeah, I'd seen Balboa back when I was 14, 15, going to the Hollywood Palladium, but I didn't know what it was. It was just kind of this fast, cartoony dance. I thought, that's interesting. And then after I met Dean, there was a lot of Balboa dancers in his scene too, so that's when I met most of the Balboa dancers who were in Southern California at that time. That would be Willie Desatoff and Ed Inez and Hank Negley and Bart and those folks. But I sort of asked Dean, I said, teach me some Balboa. And he goes, well, I'm not a very good Balboa dancer, so I think you should learn from Maxie Dorf. And I said, well, where's he? And he said, he's a car dealer in Las Vegas. So Jonathan and I drove to Las Vegas, and we weren't really good sleuths. I am not a good detective. So we just went from casino to casino saying, do you have a guy here named Maxie Dorf? I went, no. Okay, next casino. Is there a dealer here named Maxie Dorf? No? Okay. So we didn't find him. And I think most of you have probably heard this story, but when Dean died, I was at the funeral, and they were announcing the pallbearers, blah, 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 Maxie Dorf. So I look, and I knew everybody there except the one guy. So, okay, that's Maxie. Okay, this is great. So after the internment, I went up to him. I said, I know this is kind of maybe not the best place or the best time, but we couldn't find you in Vegas, and here you are. So Dean said that we should learn from you, and would you be willing to teach us? He's like, who the hell are you? And why are you asking me this? It was kind of a call back to me running into the bathroom and trying to offer people $20 to show me something, you know. Yeah, I wasn't really graceful at this.
But eager.
I was eager and tenacious. So finally he agreed to teach us. I don't know what was going on in his life. He never told me at that point, but he wouldn't give me his phone number. He would call us. He would call and go, okay, Tuesday, 6 o'clock. Dean's house, click. So we drive down Tuesday, 6 o'clock at Dean's house, and there he would be, and we do the little lesson. We go, great, when we go to the next one? He goes, I'll call you. And we would just wait, and then, you know, maybe a week or two later, he'd call back and say, Monday, 3 p.m., Dean's house.
That's amazing.
So that's how I met Maxie, anyway. And I danced with Maxie I got to dance with Maxie for the last 20 years of his life, so I really got a lot of Maxie out of that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How many people know Maxie Dorf, or you've heard of Maxie Dorf? Okay, maybe just a brief primer on Maxie, just for people who don't. He's a
super great bal swing dancer. I mean, he did Balboa, but he was not just a pure bal dancer. It was the Southern California swing hybrid that he did that was really, really good.
Really kind of a master of the
Beyond
thing.
that. Yeah,
like a master of the
he
thing.
was different than Dawn Hampton, but they had a similarity with how they were able to be inside the music in a different way than I can be. I'm a bystander, and they were inside of it. And it's hard for me to describe that, and I remember trying to explain it to you guys, and you're like, yeah, old lady, shut up. And then I showed you some kind of video, and you went,
like, whoa.
I got it.
Yeah,
I mean, he was just such a
apparent.
master at
Really?
subtlety and movement.
Like with Frankie, like one of those level of dancers. Like.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was one of the best on the planet ever. Yeah. And I was really fortunate to dance with him long enough. And again, he was pretty patient because he knew that I wanted to pass the dance on. So he said, your basic's not good enough. I go, it's step, step, hold, step, what's next? He goes, not that, So.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, like, can you give us a little bit of, I mean, we're all here at a workshop, we're taking lessons, hopefully the teachers are being nice and everything. Like, what was learning from these two guys in particular? I mean, they're kind of big towering figures, like, you got to dance with them up close and personal and, like, feel what they felt like and hear what they said. Can you give us a little sense of like what was a lesson with Dean like? What was a lesson with Maxie like?
Yeah, they were both really good dancers and very generous with their information. They weren't holding back, like a special step or anything, but they weren't real experienced teachers. So they would just kind of say, okay, do this, and I do this, and he'd go, no. And I go, well, what? And he goes, well, not that. I said, well, what do I need to change? He goes, most everything. I remember that afternoon, Jonathan and I were like, okay, we're going to do this thing. He was working on a little sectional routine, like, 4 moves or something. And he'd go, okay, start again. 5. We were on 5, 6, 5, 6. There we go. No, okay. He didn't like our rock. I mean, we didn't even get to step. Yeah. And we go, what? And he goes, well, that just looks stupid. And I was like, well, what different? He goes, do it like this. And he'd show us. I go, okay. And we approximate. He goes, no, that's not what that looks like. So it was slow going. And they weren't being obstructionists. They were just not able to explain the difference between grossly what I was doing and what they were doing. So I think that's the one thing that you guys have an advantage of, aside from YouTube, is the fact that most of us have hacked through from not knowing to knowing, and we can help you get from not knowing to knowing a little bit easier and quicker. The downside for you guys is that the best you have is us, not that we're not good, but we're not them. So you have kind of a carbon copy of something. You don't get the original. I was fortunate enough to get the original, and I feel like that's partly why I have anything to offer you guys, was that I danced, for 20, 25 years with these folks and from all over the country. And sometimes I feel kind of like, I wish I was down with 25 again, and I could move better and stuff. And then I think, but I'd have to trade that, and I don't want to trade that. The gift that the universe gave me of being able to dance with these people and hang out with them is invaluable to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Was Maxie any different than Dean in the sort of lesson thing, or was it the same sort of thing where we're just like, they'll just say no until you stumble upon it?
Yeah, he was. I mean, Dean, after a while, Dean got better at stuff. But does anybody here know Flying Lindy, the move Flying Lindy? Okay, don't worry about it.
A little bit.
When he showed it to me, it's like an 8 count, kind of it's kind of a swing out variation move. And he said, okay. I said, well, how do you do it? He goes, okay, it's 1, 2, 3, kick, 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 kick. I said, what? And he goes, 1, 2, 3, kick, 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 kick. And it was like, oh, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
And most people thought I was making that up.
No.
And then I showed him the video, and he was like, wow, he really did just say that, didn't he?
He really did. The thing is, he did the stuff. Both of them could do the stuff with pinpoint accuracy, actually.
Absolutely.
Like, I remember Maxie doing this, like, turn in with you, where, like, he would do this thing, he would turn her and then catch her in this, like, lungy dip, and every time her foot would go, whoop, like, in this very cool
I mean, he would somehow, like, boom, Not that I could ever
And
do
she
that
wasn't
now.
trying, it just happened.
I was just like, every time I'm like, oh, I'm a princess.
Yeah. And then he would
I
be
am
showing
fabulous.
Jonathan, and he's like, Jonathan, it's like this.
Until I dance with someone else, and then it's like,
Yeah.
clunk.
Yeah, and it'd be clunk every time. But do you think, I mean, on some level, of course, it's easier if someone can teach it well, but is there anything lost in the teaching of it, do you think?
Yeah, I think that the experience of I hate to use the word organic, but the way that people used to learn how to dance was just go to a dance 6-7 nights a week and dance with people, watch people, be influenced by people, get a visual, go, oh, that looks good to me, I'm going to try that, and slowly be able to just kind of work your way through the experience of it. I think that will lead to a more natural way of each individual person dancing the way they should, instead of being having something explained to you in such a way that this is what you do on one, this is what you do on two. We kind of cookie cutter it in a way, and we try to help you get out of that eventually, go like, put your own style in it. But I think that the older way of learning how to dance was harder going in some ways. It took a little bit longer, but the end product was more personalized and individualized than it is now. So that's the plus on it. The minus is it took 4 times as long.
Well, it always seemed to me that if you weren't talented, then that was maybe not going to work for you.
Well, no, because
when they just say
put it
no
this way,
forever.
I'm okay now, but I'm not talented. I am tenacious. I was, the first time I danced with Dean, and you probably heard this story too, but I'd been, I was thinking, okay, buck privates, here I come. I know how to do that swing out whippy thing. And he's gonna go like, wow, you're good. But the first words out of his mouth were, are you trying to kill me? So I was like, well, alrighty. I got a little bit to learn, I guess. It didn't quite come through the television set at me. But I think that, to your point, was that Maxie and Dean, and at first Frankie was really great, but Frankie did a move 15 different ways. He couldn't do it the same way twice. Counting was like, counting? What the? It was like hobbling him to make him count. He just didn't want to count. Aaron kind of got him to be able to count, which was constrictive to him and his ability to be as expressive as he wanted. But without that, we were all going to be lost. So, to a point, a lot of these guys went from the style of learning and expressing themselves and passing things on in an organic way to the cookie cutter, do this on one, do this on two kind of way that we're kind of used to now. And some things were lost, but some things were gained, so yeah. And it's better than nothing, no matter what.
Yeah, for sure. And lots of people are doing it, and they can swing out, so that's good.
Yeah, and we used to, the old guys would have, like 7 moves that they did, and they did them for 50 years, 7 nights a week, and they got really good at those 6 or 7 moves, And after 50 years, you get really good at that, really subtle and patinaed and beautiful. And we all know 800 moves, but none of them very well. Yeah. So we have way more vocabulary. It's just that we're just not as good at any one thing, just because we have so many things. So we're more of a horizontal knowledge, and they were more of a vertical knowledge. And it doesn't mean that one's better than the other. Just you got to pay attention to the fact that way more than any of the old people knew, but you don't do it as well.
Yeah.
And that includes me too.
Yeah. What was, if you can you describe to us sort of some of the differences and some of the similarities between some of the guys you met on the West Coast and some of the guys you met more in New York and the East Coast, like some of the sort of masters of the thing, since you had contact with a lot of these guys, like what was different about them? What was the same? Because I think right now we think of the dance as, we don't think, it's a bit more monolithic in the scene now because it's sort of universal style. And it's so heavily stamped by Frankie. I think that he would probably be the biggest influence.
Oh, hugely,
Yeah.
But then there was people like George Lloyd and Charlie Meade and other dancers back on the East Coast that were really different than Frankie, but also had a beautiful style and ability to interpret the music in a way that was beyond my ability. So I was always fascinated by them. So I didn't dance with George Lloyd that often because I lived on the West Coast.
How many
but
people know George Lloyd? Just raise your hand.
Look it up on YouTube. You'll like it.
There's only a tiny little clip, and from what I'm told, it's not totally representative, but
No.
he's really masterful, really
Right.
amazing, in a very different style, very light-footed, different style than Frankie altogether.
Right. He's kind of smooth and slidey, and anyway, but
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah.
But that's a name you should know.
George Lloyd.
George
yeah.
Lloyd.
And also Charlie Meade, I think he started doing Lindy stuff in the 50s, and he came from, I think he's from Jamaica. I could be wrong on that. But he's very interesting too, and he's still around. So, and someone's doing a book on him or a thing on him. Yeah. Anyway, blah blah blah. I forgot what I'm talking
So
about.
just like, what are the guys in New York? What were they like compared to the guys in the LA, and how were they different? How were they similar?
Right. Yeah. The thing that was similar about them was that they flowed through whatever it is they were doing from A to B to C to D. They didn't have a lot of choppiness. They weren't like step A, comma, step B, comma, swing out, underarm turn, stop. They were just continuing through. So that was the one thing that I noticed about the better dancers, was that they were more flowing from one movement into another movement. So their flow was way better than people like me who were segmenting it as step A, step B, step C, step D. And it's really hard to say. I mean, if you take everybody in this room, there's how many ever people there are here, there's that many styles of dancing, and that's kind of how it was. Most people, when the swing revival happened in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was the style wars, which was Savoy style versus Hollywood style. Hollywood style never existed. It was a word made up by Eric and Sylvia to kind of...
It's like a class title.
Yeah, well, they were kind of pointing to a certain style of LA swing that was done in the movies in the late 40s. That was it. And they called it Hollywood style. But it wasn't a style that anybody would have recognized as a style. And yeah, and there was most of those...
And the Savoy style would not really have been recognized in the Savoy for the most part.
Because, I mean, Frankie and Leon and Al Minns, they all danced completely different, you know. Which...
There wasn't a Savoy style.
No, there wasn't at all. I mean, and Norma danced really different than Ann and Sugar, and, you know. So it's the style really is... This is going to sound kind of nasty, and I don't mean it this way, but whoever's left alive, their style prevails because they're passing it on, you know? So if Frankie had died earlier and Al had lived longer, we'd be dancing differently. And if, same thing in California, if, I don't know, Lou Southern had lived longer and Dean had died earlier, we would have been dancing differently out there too. So it's kind of like whoever's left, their style is gonna be the pervasive style that's passed on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not good, bad, or otherwise, it just is. But at least it's somebody passing something on.
Yeah, and so I feel like when I talk to you about this stuff, you have more of a sense of there being these styles, and sort of like the dance just seems very quickly to not be the monolith that I see it as in general. You know, I sort of am like, okay, we're going to class, I'm teaching a swing out. There's swing out's a swing out. You can do it a bunch of ways. But like we often pay lip service to like, you can do it a bunch of ways, and then I'm like, now do my thing. And like that, I think that's fair for any one class, but I think you have such a more broad experience of the dance. You've just seen so much more of the sort of breadth of what can be done style-wise, and I think your sense of it seems to be, like the goal seems to be much more about finding yourself as a person doing this dance in a way. Do you see, there's obviously like sort of like trade-offs with how we learn now and how we learn back then, or how you learned back then. Can you talk a little bit about like what you think we're sort of trading, if there's things we can maybe things we can look for to try to like mitigate some of the things that we might lose in our sort of way of learning it now?
Yeah, I do my best, but I haven't figured it out quite yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard.
It's because when I was dancing with any of these older people, like on a swing out, I could be brought in on 1 or 2 or 3. I could come in on my right foot, my left foot, or on my right foot on my first triple, depending on how they were leading. And you get used to just not caring. The swing out isn't step forward on one or rock on one. It's step on your right foot on one if you're a follower, step on your left foot as a leader. And you can make things go away and together or just be towing. So all these different stylistic things, I had to learn how to not assume one or the other, because I used to try to assume, okay, this person's got Bliers and suspenders on. That means I'm going to walk forward on one. This person has a Letterman sweater on. That means I'm going to rock on one.
Actually, would have worked kind of okay for a while there.
Yeah, but that was not. You shouldn't dance. You shouldn't decide on how to dance by what your partner's wearing. So it was slow going, but learning how to dance well in a social situation with all these different styles, I think is what I feel most accomplished for. And I think that I'm not a great stylist, I'm not a great inventor, but boy, I can go on any freaking count. So,
well, I remember very distinctly when I took a very early workshop, maybe in the 2000 or something with
was
Stephen.
this in Ithaca?
No, it wasn't. It was in Minneapolis, where I'm from. But Stephen was
1990.
there. Yeah.
99,
I think. But it was before you were there, actually. I think it was the year that Stephen was there with someone else, and he was talking about, there's two people that I can move, they have a handle on their stomach. He said, Aaron, and he said, you. He said when he met you, that you were definitely the best person.
Wow, I
that
didn't
when
know
you guys
that.
all, yeah, he said when you guys all got together, that first sort of meetup of people, especially Can't Top the Lindy Hop. How many people have heard of Can't Top the Lindy Hop? It's sort of a seminal event where a lot of people came together. What year was that? That was
From all over
Frankie's
the world,
80th
yeah.
birthday?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually you can get a DVD of it. 94 it was. But he said at that time, in terms of being able to lead and follow, you and Jonathan were ahead of everybody in a way.
Yeah,
And
our style was pretty sad, but boy, we.
But I think it's that dedication to actually being able to dance with everybody.
Yeah, because
that's what you've been known for.
Because I think
forever.
most people were doing trying to break down a style and look like this clip or this clip or this clip. And I was just trying to social dance with anybody. So there's a little difference between trying to look a certain way, and it's folks from Sweden in the 80s weren't social dancing. They were just recreating stuff in a historic way. They had no connection. They just touched each other and both people did their thing. And they looked way cooler than I did by far, but they couldn't social dance at all. So there's a kind of a...
I'm hearing about people seeing them do their crazy hellzapop and swing outs to 120 beats per minute in New York,
Right.
and be like, what are they doing? A super slow song and then reaching way out and doing this big crazy swing out because
That's all they did,
They'd
yeah.
watched the fast clips. That's it.
So there was, people who looked really great, and that visual was what helped draw people into the scene, because without that, I think we would have been, it would have been a lot harder to get people re-interested in this dance. So the performance aspect, I think, was really, really important, but also it is a social dance. It was a social dance, and I think that aspect was back in the day a little less valued, but that's kind of the little flag I had was social dancing. Yeah. So.
Well, I think you had the benefit of being in a place where the scene hadn't sort of died off in a way. There was a continuation
Right.
of the dancing.
Yeah,
and most other places where Lindy Hop kind of came back, there was a real break.
Right.
And it was a different community doing the dance.
I think to a point that's true, but I think that most of the communities that had a thriving scene in the 40s still had a little bit of a scene through the 50s and 60s. You just had to go find it, because when I was in St. Louis, there was a place called Club Imperial, and that's where they all hung out. The shag dancers and they could call it Imperial. It was just their version of Lindy or Swing. Mm-hmm. And they kept going, like John Perdosian's still doing dancing. And they didn't stop dancing. It just was fewer people, and they did it on Sunday afternoon only. And, so it was there, but you really had to kind of look for it. And it wasn't necessarily a scene that a 20-year-old would go hey, I want some of that.
Yeah.
I want to look just like those guys in the Hager Sansa-belt slacks and the bad polo shirts.
Yeah.
That's for me.
That's what I'm interested about.
Look up Hager Sansa-belt slacks. You'll get.
There was so many styles of dancing, but only one style of pants for the guys. I don't know what
I know.
it feels. No belt,
They're
stretchy.
stretchy and one size too small.
They hated belts. I don't know. Okay, so We sort of have time maybe for one more sort of topic, and I want to sort of, let's see, how can I ask you about this? Like, can you give us some sense? I mean, you've given us some sense sort of via just telling your story a little bit, but can you give us a little sense of what this scene that we sort of exist in now, like, you were around before it was even there, and you saw it sort of go from like 2 events a year to like now there's like 2 events a weekend in every city and they're all fighting. So, like, can you give us some little timeline or some sense of like how you witnessed that? And because I think for us it's a little bit like the water we swim in, and we're like, yeah, Lindy Hop is just you go to a workshop and stuff, and that's like a novel thing that didn't necessarily ever happen.
Yeah, I think that that it's a healthy thing that we're able to have a lot of workshops, a lot of scenes, a lot of dances, a lot of events. In that, there's more people doing Lindy Hop now than there were back in the day, and most of you, well, a lot of us, have Lindy Hopped way longer than the original Lindy Hop scene lasted before it turned into the 50s stuff. You know, it was basically, 20 years, that was it. And, and our scene is longer than the original scene. So,
which is crazy to me, but yeah,
it is
it's longer
crazy.
than the swing era, actually.
Yeah, I think so. And it's different because our economics are different, our social mores are different. It's a different time, and we are influenced by other music. They didn't have a lot of hip hop music back in '32. It wasn't happening, but we have different musical influences that will affect you in a positive way or a negative way, but will be an influence. I think that politically and financially, things are really different for us too, and that those things are affecting how we dance and affecting our scene. And I think that we're way more fortunate in some ways. The scene is much more broadened. Everybody should be welcomed. Back in the day, people were welcomed, but I don't think that people were encouraged to wear really horrible dancers or jerky people. We'll kind of endure a jerky person if they're a good dancer, but as long as they shut up,
But we'll also sort of like have nice people who aren't the best come around, and they're still very welcome.
Correct, And I think that I don't know, it's hard for me, I'm not exactly sure what you want me to focus on, but I remember when there was just these little pockets of the old folks dancing on Sundays, and now we have these huge events,
I'm
like
wondering,
Lindy
what was
Focus.
some intermediate step between there? Like, you went from Bobby McGee's and nothing to like Swingin' at Savoy, and then another thing next weekend in LA and everywhere. What was in between there? Like, how did this sort of scene, as we know it, get a bit started?
Yeah, it started. Some of the swing community people started having little conventions, which were just an excuse for, like, the folks from Southern California to come up here. And then there was one in Phoenix, and then there was one in Oklahoma City, and one in St. Louis, and it was more of an excuse for everybody to get together and dance a little and drink a lot, and that was kind of a deal. That's what they did. And, so I was trying to go to those things. And then I think the first out-of-town workshop I ever taught was at the Avenue Ballroom in San Francisco in 1985. And I thought, ooh, I'm traveling and I'm teaching. Fancy. And so there was like local dance scenes that were trying to happen, and folks would be able to get up enough money to hire somebody from out of town who was better at it than their local scene leader. And that's how the workshops started to develop slowly all over the United States that way. And there might have been like 15 workshops a year everywhere. And now there's probably 15 workshops a weekend or 20 workshops a weekend, maybe even more.
All over, yeah.
It's all over. So it's much more pervasive. And I think that the scene that we have now is much more, it's more solid, and I think that it's going to have long legs. I mean, I can see this continuing for another 50 years without a problem. Whereas the original scene had some, the war kind of messed it up for a while, and then after the war, the music kind of messed it up. So, the war took everybody away for World War II, and then the music scene changed drastically from big band swing to, small combos and rock and roll, so things had to change. But we've embraced the music we have, like Naomi's and her Handsome Devils, people who are taking the music, writing new music, and continuing that legacy. We're not stuck with whatever's going to show up on the radio.
Yeah, that's adorable, radio.
Sorry.
Okay, so maybe final thoughts. Do you have anything you'd like to say to this group of people who are willing to listen to what you have to say and think you are important? Do you want to say anything out there to the Lindy
I've been
Hop
around
world?
a long time. That's what the most important thing is, that I'm interested and I've been around a long time. So I do have a wealth of knowledge just because I was there. It's nothing special about me. I'm just there, and I'm tenacious. So if you do have any questions and then you don't want to talk about it here, you can find me between now and midnight tonight, I guess. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have or help you with anything. I don't know. I'm just really glad that you guys have given up a whole weekend to do this dance, because the dance would die without you guys doing this every weekend. Most of you aren't here on a free pass. You had to spend some money and time and a lot of effort and no sleep to be here and to dance and to give up a whole weekend for that. Hopefully you're having fun and enjoying it and feeling more encouraged in how you can dance, and having better skills so you have more fun. Mostly the learning how to dance stuff should be have more fun, really, not look a particular way or be a particular way. I would hope that you could embrace the social aspect of the dance as much as you do any kind of technical stuff, because that's where the dance is going to live, is your individual styles, your individuality, and how you feel about the music. May not be earth-shattering, and you won't be like the most famous person in the world, but without each individual one of you in this kind of mosaic, the dance would be way less rich than it is. And I think that that's something you need to hang on to and share with the scene your own individual piece, because without you, it's a less good scene.
I think that's well said. Ladies and gentlemen, Sylvia Sykes.